Hello everyone, welcome to 100M Daily Podcast, and the news today we will be talking about Israel under fire, Iranian missiles strike Tel Aviv. The transcript from Fox News titled Breaking, Israel intercepts Iranian missiles over Tel Aviv details a significant Iranian ballistic missile and drone attack on Israel. Live reporting from Tel Aviv captures interceptors lighting up the sky, with journalists taking cover amidst explosions. The discussion contextualizes this attack as a retaliation for Israeli strikes on Iranian officials and facilities, noting the unprecedented scale of the assault and the activation of Israeli and potentially American defense systems. Concerns are raised about Iran's ability to overwhelm defenses and the potential for further conflict targeting both Israeli cities and U.S. forces in the region. The current escalation, which could potentially lead to war, is understood as a direct Iranian response to recent Israeli military actions. Specifically, the sources indicate the following reasons why this conflict is unfolding. Israeli targeting of Iranian officials and facilities. On April 1st, Israel targeted the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, resulting in the death of a top official from the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The current Iranian missile and drone attack on Israel occurred 12 days later, in direct response to this incident. More broadly, the Iranians are responding to ongoing waves of strikes by Israel, which have involved targeting not only Iranian nuclear facilities but also top IRGC officials, including the leader of the IRGC. An operation overnight before the current missile attack saw the Israelis took up the entirety of Iran's IRGC Air Force leadership. According to Israeli security sources, this was a surprise attack where officials were gathered at a meeting point in Iran and then killed. This overnight operation also resulted in the killing of Iran's top nuclear scientist. Israel has also damaged Iranian enrichment facilities and has been targeting missile production sites and launching positions. The sources state that Israelis are continuing to strike Iran. Pre-existing tensions and historical context. The sources note that Israel has been concerned about the Iranian nuclear program. A similar attack against Israel by Iran occurred in October of 2024. This date appears anachronistic but is as stated in the source. Another reference to a similar attack mentions last year when Iranians fired 200 missiles, most of which were shot down. This current situation is being viewed as the big conflict everyone discussed for decades, possibility between Israel and Iran. While Israeli officials are not yet calling it a war, the ongoing events are perceived as days' conflict ahead. The sources also highlight the differing capabilities that would come into play if this escalation turns into a full-scale war. Iran's primary capability against Israel is seen as throwing ballistic missiles, whereas Israel is capable of widely penetrating Iran's airspace, launching attacks to take out its infrastructure.
Come back to the deep dive. Okay, let's set the scene. Imagine this. It's late, skies over Tel Aviv are quiet, and then bam, they just light up. Flashes, then those sirens start wailing.
Chilling sound.
Yeah. And what starts as this, stark, almost terrifying beauty turns into this massive ballistic missile barrage. Right at Israel's heart. Unprecedented.
Truly.
So tonight, that's what we're diving into. Right into the middle of that recent missile exchange, Israel and Iran. We've got live reports, stuff from the ground, expert takes. And what you see immediately is how fast things like this can just escalate. So the mission here for us is to get a handle on not just what happened, but, why it matters, what this really means for the whole region.
And what's really striking, I think, is how it all unfolded so fast. You immediately saw the scale of it, the Iranian attack, but also that defensive response. Pretty remarkable, very coordinated.
That's a great point. The live visuals, people saw interceptor rounds coming off these dramatic flashes in the skies over Tel Aviv.
Right, clear sign defense was active.
Exactly. And the public, they were told, enter a protected space, stay there till further notice. And this wasn't like a minor thing, was it?
No, not at all.
This was labeled a significant attack. The sources call it a massive ballistic missile barrage, and it was aimed right at big population centers. Specifically Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Israel's second largest city, 300,000 people, plus the Ministry of Defense nearby.
And just so everyone's clear, ballistic missiles, these things are fast, hard to stop. They carry big payloads, long distances. So aimed at a dense city, that's a serious threat.
And that threat immediately kicked Israel's pretty sophisticated defenses into high gear. We saw the aero defense system deployed.
That's their top tier one, right?
Exactly. Long range, designed to hit ballistic missiles way up high in the atmosphere. But American systems were involved too, crucially. And you also saw short-range systems activating closer to the city. That tells you the attack was direct, it was imminent. It kind of reminded me of that defense we saw before, remember? Israel, the U.S., even Jordan working together with aircraft, intercepting threats, shows that coordination.
Yeah, the unified front. Still, even with all that defense, we saw some impacts. Smoke coming up from downtown Tel Aviv. Reports said 3 impacts were seen. Does that mean the defense has limits? Or is that just expected when you've got that sheer volume of missiles coming in?
Well, it's likely a bit of both, you know. No system is completely foolproof, especially against a saturation attack. But the initial info, remarkably.
No injuries, right. That's what we heard initially.
Yeah, preliminary reports said no injuries, which is pretty incredible. Shrapnel was a worry, obviously. Emergency crews were out checking things.
And the IDF, they put out a statement pretty fast. Confirmed the sirens, confirmed interceptions happening from Iran, and said the Air Force was operating to intercept and strike where necessary. Basically doing what they needed to do.
A very fluid situation. Real-time stuff.
Absolutely. So if we pull back a bit, connect the dots, this big Iranian attack, it didn't just happen in a vacuum.
No, definitely not.
It was a response, right? Came 12 days later, tied directly to that Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, April 1st, last year. Killed a top IRTC guy.
That seems to be the immediate trigger, yes.
Yeah.
A direct retaliation for that specific event.
Okay, so keeping that context, let's zoom out even more. How does this attack fit into Iran's bigger picture? Their motivations seem to be evolving.
Well, yeah, it's not just about that one consulate strike, though that was the catalyst here.
Right.
It connects to this ongoing shadow war, essentially. Israeli operations hitting Iranian nuclear sites, but also targeting top figures in the IRGC.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's big military force.
Exactly. We've heard about damage to enrichment facilities, missile production sites inside Iran, and that Damascus strike itself, it was described as a surprise attack. Officials apparently gathered for a meeting, then hit.
And this isn't the first time we've seen Iran use missiles like this, is it? There's history here.
There is. Think back to October 2024. Iran fired, what was it, around 300-plus missiles?
Wow.
And yeah, many were intercepted. But reports said Israeli bases took significant damage because those missiles get through fast and ground defenses maybe had limitations then.
So this tactic, these bigger bursts of missiles,
Yeah.
it's about overwhelming the defenses.
It seems like that's the strategy. Overwhelm, saturate. Given Iran has, thousands of ballistic missiles in its arsenal, it suggests maybe a shift away from relying just on precision or surprise.
Towards just sheer volume.
Yeah, kind of a brute force approach.
Yeah.
Accepting maybe more will get shot down, but hoping enough get through because there are just so many. It's a high-stakes gamble, really, and it points to them acting more directly.
Okay, let's unpack that direct action idea, because the sources mentioned something really interesting. Iran no longer has the strengths of its proxies in the same way.
That's a key point.
Talking about groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, these groups Iran supports.
Right. And it's quite telling when you look at what's happened to those proxies. Hezbollah's leadership reportedly methodically taken out.
Wow.
And Israeli strikes targeted precision missile components, sites in Lebanon and the Houthis. They seem limited now, only able to fire in very small moments, not these big coordinated barrages like before.
So if the proxies are weaker...
It suggests Iran feels it has to rely more on its own direct capabilities, like this massive missile launch we just saw.
Which creates this stark contrast in how they operate, doesn't it? Almost asymmetrical. Iran launches ballistic missiles directly.
A kind of standoff weapon approach.
While Israel seems to have this capacity to, as the sources say, widely penetrate Iran's airspace, launching attacks on infrastructure, hitting targets seemingly where it wants, when it wants, and who it wants.
The very different projection of power, yes.
Yeah.
Different offensive capabilities on display.
Now, this escalation, it obviously brings the U.S. into the picture, or at least raises the risk level for them.
Immediately. You have to think about American forces, bases, embassies all over the region.
And we saw reactions, right? Partial evacuation at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, voluntary evacuation orders for families, military staff in places like Bahrain, Kuwait.
Yeah, precautionary measures. But it shows the concern is real. And there's precedent. Remember January 2020? After the drone strike killed Soleimani.
The Iranian general.
Iran fired 13 ballistic missiles back then, targeting a base in western Iraq housing U.S. troops. So the potential for U.S. assets to become targets, even if indirectly, is always there in these situations.
It highlights how U.S. presence, which is often meant to stabilize, can kind of become a lightning rod itself.
Exactly. It draws them into the line of fire, sometimes unintentionally, when these regional conflicts flare up.
So where does this leave us, the big picture view? This whole event, it kind of puts things in that larger frame, as one source put it, like that big conflict everyone discussed for decades, possibility between Israel and Iran. It feels closer now.
It certainly feels more direct, more overt. Israeli officials, they're apparently not yet calling it a war, but the sheer intensity suggests, days of conflict ahead, and that maybe Iran is preparing for war, or at least acting like it is.
It definitely feels like a critical moment, a potentially shifting moment for the whole region.
Absolutely. It's evolving rapidly.
Okay, so as we start to wrap this deep dive for today, let's just quickly recap the main takeaways. We've looked at this really unprecedented direct Iranian missile attack on Israel.
And that immediate, pretty impressive defensive reaction.
Yeah. And we've dug into the context, linking it back to that specific Israeli strike in Damascus, but also Iran's broader motivations, the ongoing operations.
And crucially, those shifting dynamics in the region. The proxies, like Hezbollah and the Houthis, seem weakened.
Right. Which seems to be pushing Iran towards more direct confrontation. We saw the defense systems playing a huge role. And the potential risks for the U.S., for American assets in the Middle East, are undeniable.
Very real implications there. Which leads to, I think, a really important question for us all to think about moving forward.
Okay.
Given this shift we're seeing, towards more direct engagement between Israel and Iran, and its apparently diminished role for the proxies, how might that fundamentally reshape things?
Reshape the balance of power, future stability in the Middle East.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How does this change the game?
That's definitely something to keep mulling over. A lot of complex layers here, and they're clearly still unfolding.